We're here in the Scottsdale Library on the hunt for a old TV show here. Looks like we've got a number of full seasons. This was a show called Hogan's Heroes, and it was this guy here, Bob Crane, who was the star of that TV show. You may remember it from when it was on the air, or in my case, from all the reruns in the 1980s, right? Here you can see another famous character, Colonel Klink. And we're going to talk about this guy, basically his last day here in Scottsdale before he was mysteriously murdered. And we will try to get at least some look, much of a look as we can, at the place where this mysterious murder of one Bob Crane took place. Let's see what we can find. I don't know what this mall is called, but we will call it the mall that time forgot. There's quite a bit here, which is pretty old school. Scottsdale tends to be kind of an upscale area, but this little mall has managed to keep a lot of its character from probably even back towards the time when Bob Crane would have been in his play that he owned. It was called Beginner's Luck, and that play was taking place in 1978 in that building right in front of you there. It's kind of a gray building in the middle of this mall with today an orange entry there. So that was, at that time, 1979, that was the Windmill Theater, dinner theater. And of course it was a thing, right? That people would go to a place like this and eat dinner in front of some sort of entertainment. Here you can see it looks like somebody's probably stayed the night in this little parking spot right here. Got a towel kind of blocking the window. So that was their spot, most likely, overnight. So, Beginner's Luck was, you know, not the best place for Bob Crane to be at that time. His career was kind of starting to falter. This is a person, of course, who we have to keep in mind. By this time, he was doing things like guest appearances on shows like The Love Boat. Not exactly at the height of his career when he was doing his play here at the then Windmill Theater. And here I'm going to try and get a look at this car, because this is basically the same kind of car, and it's even got California plates. It's the same kind of car that Bob drove back in 1978, and I'm sure this is not the car, of course, but what you're seeing right here, this was what guys like Bob Crane would drive. You know, that was the Bachelor Mobile, and he could go around Scottsdale and bounce around to various bars and see if he could, you know, pick up a lady for the night. On the evening of Bob Crane's infamous murder, he was here at the Windmill Dinner Theater and had just finished up the play. It was late into the evening, and he came out to his car to find that he had a flat tire. And there's been some suspicion around whether somebody might have been messing with Bob's car that night when he was in doing the play. In any case, however the flat tire happened, he ended up having to kind of limp the car over to a nearby gas station. And again, this was 1978, so even in the evening, he was able to actually go into a gas station and find somebody who could get him rolling again with a new tire. So after the stop at the gas station, Bob headed back to his temporary lodgings, you might call them, at a complex which today is known as Winfield Place Condominiums. So let's take a trip over there and see what's left for us to see. Anytime. It's the classic Scottsdale traffic light. Yeah, 5-minute wait, you know. we're turning left here onto Chaparral Road, and up on the right hand side here, as soon as we go across this canal, you're going to see some pine trees, and back in there on the right is Winfield Place condominiums. That is where Bob Crane was staying back when he was murdered in 1978. Very nicely landscaped complex to this day. And then up here, just on the corner of the next intersection, is going to be where his friend John Carpenter had been staying at the time of Crane's death. And it's kind of back behind some bushes and walls here on the left-hand side. At the time, that was the Sunburst Hotel back in there. And today, it's a pretty nice place to stay. It's called the Scott. We'll get a quick peek through the bushes here on a quiet Sunday morning at what is today the Scott, formerly the Sunburst Hotel. Still a very nice property to this day. So let's go see where Bob was staying. If you've ever seen the movie Autofocus, that gives you kind of a rundown of Bob Crane's life and what he was like. Greg Kinnear plays Bob Crane, and I believe it's maybe Willem Dafoe who plays Bob Crane's friend, John Carpenter, who was staying just down the street at the Sunburst Hotel. And there used to be a time when you could actually go back in here and really get a good look at the apartment that Bob Crane was murdered in. I'd always intended to do a video back there when that was still something that you could do, and I never did it, and now I'll just have to describe to you what it's like if you do decide to venture back there yourself. The unit itself is 132A. It's a ground unit, and it's kind of back in the middle of that complex, away from this busy road. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and you can see some of the layout of it. If you take a look at some of the books on Bob Crane's murder, they kind of show you what that apartment would have looked like in terms of its layout. And that is where Bob was murdered. He was apparently just sleeping in this condo, which was owned by the Windmill Theater. So that condo would basically be the place where whoever was performing as the star at the Windmill Theater would stay in that condo back there. People like, for example, Jamie Farr of MASH may have stayed back here. I know, just looking at some of the news clippings from that time, that he was one person who had done some acting at the Windmill Theater. So anyway, Bob was staying at the theater's star apartment back in there, and he was apparently just sleeping when one night somebody came up and bludgeoned him to death with his own camera tripod, for all things. Bob was, you might say, well, he was a bit of a photography nut, and he had a special kind of photography that he was really into, and that was called making videos of his sexual escapades with various women that he would pick up around town, right? And so it's always kind of theorized that because whoever killed Bob Crane beat him to death with his own camera tripod, it's always been kind of theorized that maybe it was, you know, a boyfriend or a husband of one of these people that Bob had had some kind of recorded escapade with, who might have come and decided to get some revenge. It's even theorized that his friend John Carpenter, who again was staying right down the street here, that Carpenter himself might have been the person who decided to basically take out his friend. It's thought that Carpenter was getting into some kind of sexual kinkiness that even was too much for Bob Crane, and perhaps Bob was kind of trying to push, you know, keep John at more of a distance because of he wasn't real comfortable maybe with where all this stuff might have been going. And so John Carpenter was put on trial. It took
into the 1990s before he was put on trial for Bob Crane's death, and he was actually found not guilty. So there wasn't enough evidence to really find John Carpenter guilty of killing Bob Crane, even though there were some pretty suspicious things found in John Carpenter's rental car. The car that he had been renting at that time, at the time of Crane's death, was found to have some little bits of human tissue inside, kind of on the interior of the doors, along with some very tiny little blood spatter. So that seems kind of suspicious, but not enough in and of itself, along with the rumors, not enough to actually convict John Carpenter. I should mention, if you do decide to come here and kind of venture back there, make sure to check out Bob Crane's former parking spot. It's the only spot that is not labeled with a unit number. So apparently when they were doing some kind of painting back in there, they must have decided to be kind of a cool idea or a good idea to leave Bob Crane's spot as the only one that is not marked up on its kind of like sun shield up above. There's no unit number up there. That's where Bob used to park that awesome 1970s mobile. So that's where we're going to end this one. I wish I could have brought you back there, but I hope this does give you some good information and insight into what things look like today in and around the site of Bob Crane's final day here in 1978 in Scottsdale, Arizona.